Hard Eyes follows a pair of co-workers who are working overtime on Valentine's Day, and they are mistaken for a couple by the Hard Eyes killer, a ruthless and notorious serial killer who goes around slaughtering couples on the most romantic night of the year. So this film was directed by Josh Rubin, and it stars Mason Gooding, Olivia Holt, Jordana Brewster, and Devon Sawa. Now, I love a good holiday slasher. Obviously, you have classics of the genre like Black Christmas and Halloween, but even more recently, we've had the recent Thanksgiving by Eli Roth, which I really loved. But we've never really had a good Valentine's Day slasher. Now, I will say, I haven't seen the original My Bloody Valentine, but I've heard mixed things about it. I have seen the My Bloody Valentine remake, and you can get a bit of fun out of it, but it's really not that good. And I really wasn't a fan of Valentine, I think it was called, from the early 2000s, the one with Denise Richards. So I was hoping that Hard Eyes would be an addition to the holiday slasher subgenre that would be good enough to be worth merit watching each time on Valentine's Day. And not that I give a flying fuck about Valentine's Day, but Hard Eyes is good enough to merit a yearly watch. Every Valentine's Day, I could easily see myself rewatching this. And interestingly enough, what surprised me the most about this movie was that it was less of a late 90s, early noughts throwback slasher than it was a throwback rom-com to the same era. I was expecting much more of a kind of I Know What You Did Last Summer, or, Valentine type movie just in the modern day. But it wasn't so much like that. It was more of a rom-com from that time that just so happened to have a slasher running around in it. And I thought it was a really, really effective mix of genres. And one of the most important things for me about a good slasher is to have a good final girl. And one of the most important things about a good rom-com is to have a couple with actors that have chemistry with each other, actors that are charming, actors that are likable. And Hard Eyes has both. You really do like Olivia Holt and Mason Gooding as basically like the combined final girl, but you also root for them as a couple. And that is so fascinating to me, that you really get invested in their love story. I came here for the slasher and the thrills and the excitement of it all. But even when you weren't getting that, I was invested in their story because Mason Gooding and Olivia Holt are both so funny and so entertaining and charismatic that I was rooting for their relationship as well as them to get the better of the Hard Eyes killer. Now, the three genres that Hard Eyes mashes together are romance, comedy, and slasher. Now, we've just talked about the romance. I think it hit the nail on the head. As far as comedy goes, it definitely lands more often than it doesn't. I won't say everything landed for me. There were some jokes that fell flat, not cringe-inducing ones, but just some gags and things that kind of leaned a little too silly for me. It was just like, yep, we're still making this joke, and let's move on. Sometimes it kind of was like beating a dead horse, but the vast majority of the time, I liked everything a lot. I laughed way more than 6 times. It passed the 6 laugh test, and it was both basically just due to the chemistry and the relationship between both Mason Gooding and Olivia Holt. It was their character interactions that made me laugh. Now, the romantic aspects for me worked. Most of the comedy aspects for me also worked. But the most important one, does this film succeed as a slasher? And I think it absolutely does. In the modern day, you are basically forced to make your slasher as gory and as just nasty as you can. There's no more of this kind of I Know What You Did Last Summer, or even earlier than that, some of the Friday the 13th sequels where they're just bloodless. No. We're here for the carnage and for the gore and everything else in between, and it delivers in spades on the bloody goodness. And yeah, real wince-inducing moments. I really, really love the opening scene. I think that's probably where the film peaked for me, because it kind of combines romance, comedy, and slasher all into one, almost could be like a perfect little short film. I really love the look of the Hard Eyes killer. I could easily see HEK, as he's called in the film, becoming a franchise. I could see more films with this killer. I really love the design. I love the glowing love Hard Eyes. I think they're hilarious, and it definitely manages to make you fear the killer, because you don't watch it and it's not like, it's just popcorn fun. It does have good tension here and there. The killer isn't incompetent. The killer isn't stupid. The killer is always, not always, but at least half a step ahead in front of the protagonist. And it makes you actually fear for them. And the confrontations and run-ins are actually really quite tense. And it's quite shocking because when you have such a lovey-dovey little film with Mason Gooding and Olivia Holt basically falling in love, and then you have that collide with this really intense, really gory slasher, you think that that's not going to work. You think that's going to give you tonal whiplash. And by some miracle, it doesn't. Now, this kind of sounds off topic, but just stick with me. If you remember last year, we had Smile 2, a really, really solid film. But I went into it basically saying, oh, so this is the premise of the film. I bet you this is how the film's going to end. And it ended exactly the way that I predicted it. When I heard the premise of Hard Eyes, I'm like, okay, a slasher that comes out and kills couples on Valentine's Day. I bet you this is how it's going to end. And I don't want to say that just for those of you that haven't seen it, but it surprised me. I was really expecting it to go down the easy path. I was expecting it to go down the path that would have been just the simplest, the most common kind of expectation. But it surprised me. It threw me for a loop. It actually didn't. It went in its own original direction. And for some people that won't work. For me, it really, really worked. I thought it was really quite funny and twisted. And I'm just glad that it went for something a bit off the beaten path. It wasn't just, the same old shit again. Now, I don't mind when slashers are, traditional or use the same kind of formula because that's what we love about slashers. But I do love it when a slasher has the guts to do something different and surprise you. I will say though, I do have a few issues with the pacing of the film. Now, I think it blends the genres really, really well so that it never feels like tonal whiplash or anything. It really feels like one good mix of them all. But there are points when it kind of has a few lulls and kind of goes for more of that rom-com side of things with no slasher in sight. And for the most part, I was invested in that. But as I was saying earlier about some of the comedy and some of the jokes not landing, you do kind of notice when it is in a bit of a lull because you're kind of like, okay, that joke didn't quite land and neither did this one. I'm kind of looking forward to the Hard Eyes Killer returning and causing some mayhem. And finally, while I did enjoy the final act quite a bit, I had some problems with how they got there. The writing in the third act is a little strange. So you get to this point of the film where you do really feel like you are coming up to the crescendo. And then you kind of feel like that was kind of a little like petered out a little bit. And then there's like a 3-minute stretch from there until the like complete final showdown thing. And it's those 3 minutes is like the writing and the script is hanging on by the skin of its teeth to get these characters from point X to point Y. It just seemed like they were stretching a lot. I was like, what the fuck? Really? So if they had have found a more fluid way to go into the final act or go into, the big climax of the film, if they had have found a more organic way to get characters from this point to that point, I think it would have gelled a lot more with me. It's just that I was really quite surprised by what they did. It just felt very unorthodox and wrong with how they did it. It just did not work. But overall, I really, really enjoyed Hard Eyes. And I was just surprised with how much I enjoyed it, especially considering that I was going in expecting a slasher. And it was more of a throwback rom-com than a slasher. And I enjoyed that rom-com stuff so much that the fact that it wasn't a slasher didn't bother me all too much. Now, it definitely was noticeable in parts and sometimes the pacing was a bit off, and especially when the comedy kind of fell flat. But it delivered in more ways than I was expecting it to. And for the vast majority of it, it delivered extremely well. Hard Eyes is absolutely worth a watch. Thanks for checking out my review on Hard Eyes. Let me know what you thought of this film. Let me know if you saw it on a Valentine's Day date night or whatever. And yeah, I will see you in the next video review which will probably be the monkey, which I'm very, very excited for. I'll see you all then. Bye.